The parkour clothing industry is dead. It's not looking good. If you were going to start, you probably shouldn't. If you have started setting up a business within this space, you should probably just quit while you're ahead. It is not looking like a sustainable space to create businesses at the moment. Or is it? Maybe we just need to get better at adapting to the ever-changing circumstances of the world, social media, and actually start treating some of these aspiring businesses like businesses. This video is kind of me throwing my 2 cents of thoughts into the discourse of everything that's come about since Farang announced the closure of Farang Clothing, which is kind of their clothing half of the Farang business. But I think, let's be honest, or I'm going to be honest, I think it kind of spells the end of Farang as we know it. Anyone who knows the team knows that they were once much more of a cohesive sort of titan of parkour, not only putting out incredible clothing drops, but also video content and feeling like quite a cohesive team, despite the fact that they had athletes displaced all over the world. And it is disheartening to see, in the sense that Farang have Dom, Joe Scandra, Pasha, Jason Paul, Anand, Zen, the combined millions of followers around the world, many of who are not even involved in the parkour community. Like, if that brand can't make a clothing brand work, then who can? But then on the other side of the coin, it's been fairly evident that there's been very little effort put into promoting the Farang clothing stuff or even any of their other projects really in the last couple of years. So to be honest, none of this news came as a surprise. I mean, I know the guys personally, so I kind of knew what was on the horizon. But I don't think it needs to be viewed as being that disheartening that these guys have shut down. I just watched Callan from Contendant. Contendant Parkour is another small parkour brand in the space. And Callan put up a video recently sort of going into this. He raised some good points. He also raised some points that I have my own opinions on. And I just felt like chiming in. I mean, firstly, it's understandable why Farang has slowed down. Many of the guys, well, apart from the fact that they're all over the world, many of the guys have sort of growing families. I know how much of a time suck that is. Oh, that's fun, isn't it? And the last few years has been really hard from a business and supply chain point of view. Callan in his video raised the point that COVID obviously has had a number of effects. My kind of rebuttal to that would be that technically, and I think Farang probably saw the same thing, the year of 2020 when COVID hit was actually the best year of revenue that I think any parkour brand who was pushing at that time probably saw. All the Americans had stimulus checks. A lot of people were sitting at home with kind of expendable time and money to do things. And a lot of people bought parkour clothing. I know this because my old brand, Motus, had the best year ever, as did Stora. Huge years of revenue. The trouble came afterwards. So things COVID definitely has affected is, production costs have gone through the roof. Shipping costs have continued to go through the roof. Now there's been, there's issues with the Red Sea and stuff's getting diverted around Africa to get from China to the UK. If you're shipping from China, that is. Farang obviously didn't have that problem, but they also had the issue of shipping from Thailand to their customers, which has incredibly expensive import costs. There's a lot of tough things for a small business in this time. It doesn't mean that it's impossible. It just means there's this case of adapting with regards to the way that a team, brand, entrepreneur positions their business. The hardest thing is treating it seriously and growing it at a sustainable pace, and sort of essentially knowing how to just sort of reinvest the funds generated by a clothing brand to keep that thing growing without shooting yourself in the foot. And that's exactly what I did with Motus, and I've spoken in length before, is that I fucked it with Motus. Very early on I got into cash flow issues. I took on debt to try and sort of save the company. That debt then really, I just had to get more and more to try and keep the company going, because I wanted to invest in more and more progressive things, expensive trousers. The shipments get bigger, the collections get bigger. You have amazing periods of revenue and suddenly everything looks like it's going to be all right. And then you have an issue where, you get order 600 pairs of trousers and they're all trash and you can't get your money back from the factory. These things can all compound and kind of snowball, and it's very, very easy, even for the best of business people, to run into cash flow issues, especially when you're dealing with fluctuating sales trends, different sort of people being interested in different elements of parkour fashion. All it can take is a couple of bad releases, a few bad t-shirts that people don't like, stuff that you think, oh, that's a good one, that's going to work. You order 200 t-shirts and then actually, no one buys them. Suddenly you've got big, ooh, don't hit that, big issues. And it's exactly, how I got into trouble with Motus. I can't speak for other brands, but it's very, very easy to do. Callan also raised the point that people just want, functional clothing, like the newly released Stora tech jacket, which there is 100% demand for. Some of the best, periods of sales throughout a parkour brand's year will be when they release higher ticket, more progressive items such as trousers, shoes, jackets and things. But having now been involved in 2 parkour businesses and also, seeing the numbers and speaking to people who run many others, t-shirts and hoodies will always make up a substantial, we're talking like sometimes the vast majority of what a small clothing brand will do, because it's the most attainable for the most people. A 25, 35 pound t-shirt, you can buy a lot more of those. There's a lot more of those in your wardrobes than 75 pound jackets. I do think COVID probably has affected people feeling like there's sort of that opportunity, that entrepreneurial opportunity to start businesses and things the last few years. When I started Motus, I was basically riding on the coattails of Storm, Farang, Stora, all of these other guys doing it at the same time. There was kind of this wave of like, parkour industry, everyone support this. We were all riding a very, very different world when it came to attention on parkour. The attention on new and emerging teams was very different to what it is now. Couple that with the fact that it was cheaper to make clothing back then, so it was more attainable. There was just this wave of support that I think now is not so much there. The last couple of years, we've seen this massive rise in kind of individualism in terms of how people want to be dressing. I don't think as many people want to turn up to an event and see everyone in the same t-shirt as it used to feel, where you had that community of like, sick, everyone's wearing a Storm strike t-shirt and there's another guy in the same Motus t-shirt as me. There's also kind of the skatification of parkour. It's that, that Y2K clothing trend, which I don't think any clothing brand really has leaned into as quickly as they probably should have, to capitalize on the obvious desire to wear jorts and retro themed t-shirts and things like that. I think 2 of the brands that I think are doing this the best at the moment would be Keeper and GFAM, in the sense that they're hitting kind of fashion trends more on the head, which helps. It keeps them relevant. They are very, very involved with the community, hosting events. They're doing a lot of collaboration with each other. I see a huge amount of potential with teams and brands like that. And I think there's still just, I honestly don't think people should be discouraged by teams like Farang and things closing their doors. I think, if anything, it is just a changing of tides. And it's just a case of these newer brands rising up. I think COVID delayed that. I think COVID has kind of delayed this rise of these new faces, but I do not think by any means that it's over. The kind of advice I would give to anyone starting these emerging things is that, especially if you're a team, let's say you're a team of 7, let's take Stora for example, it is very, very hard to get a clothing brand, which the margins in clothing compared to, let's say, a digital product, for example, or even the AdSense from a YouTube video, it's very, very hard to split the profits of that, because realistically, you sell a t-shirt for £35, a lot of that money is already portioned away in the cost of the t-shirt and the cost of fulfillment and things like this. The actual money you have to play with on the back of that isn't huge, and the majority of that needs to be reinvested into more stock to grow the business. So it's very, very hard to get a business to the stage where it can support, or even, dish out just a bit of money to, let's say, 7 athletes. Even Farang at their stage, they were still, obviously, as individuals, relying on a huge amount of commercial work and things. The money from clothing salaries, I imagine, I don't know this for a fact, I'm sure was not the biggest contributor to sort of paying their bills. To be honest, if you were going to start a clothing brand in parkour today, you need to be doing it as very much like a side project with another source of sustainable income supporting you for the foreseeable future, because there's a good chance you'll never get it to the stage where it can support you. And if it does, it's gonna be a while. You obviously, you can strike gold, you can have something go viral on TikTok or whatever, and you might get lucky. But you basically need to be building up that cash buffer to weather the storm, because you might have a really great initial release. You sell 100 t-shirts and you feel great and there's a chunk of money in the bank, but it's so easy to just spend that in just slightly the wrong way and just have some circumstances change, and suddenly you're kind of back to square one again. When I set up Motus, I had all these huge aspirations of making some money on clothing and then dishing out money to community projects, and I started trying to do that way too early on, and you're literally just shooting yourself in the foot and making your life so much harder for yourself. So by all means, start a clothing brand, self-fund it, do whatever you can, but don't expect it to be sort of putting money into your own personal bank accounts for a long time. And the longer you can hold that off, the more safe and secure that business will be, the more money you can invest into the business itself, the better. And it's also the engagement with the community, whether that is through making content or hosting events. It needs to be sustained, and the promotion of clothing as well. Like, we live in this attention world on social media where everything is moving so fast, like Farang posting one post on their Instagram about their latest clothing drop, which was a good few months ago now, most of their followers wouldn't have even seen that. It's so easy for this stuff just to get swept away in the sea of media that we see every single day, and it just comes down to taking this thing seriously. Like, if you were going to do it, if you were going to add any kind of revenue stream to your parkour team or brand or whatever you want to do, implement a strategy from day one so that you have stuff to fall back on, so you can look at it and go, oh, okay, so posting once a day for a week has kind of given us this result. Let's try ramping it up to twice a day. Let's try, introducing this social channel as well. There's so much content out there, podcasts and YouTube videos, about how to sort of build these strategies, and so that you can build something that you can test, because there's a great book actually called Measure What Matters, and you can't really measure how well something is doing until you start, implementing it and looking back on that. So this is a ramble, I'm sorry, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I do not think things are looking down. I think we are seeing the turning of the tide from some of these legacy brands where life has caught up with them and they've moved on to more important things, and realize that the time and effort put into running a clothing brand is not necessarily sustainable for them at this current stage. And not everything has to last forever. It's totally fine to want to do something for a few years and then move, because passions change. So if you want to give it a go, absolutely give it a go. If you want, more info from me, I'm sure I can help. Like, if you just want to have a chat about ideas you've had, or just look to other sort of sporting brands, or just other clothing brands, or just other companies, other businesses, there's so much inspiration to be found out there with regards to marketing and positioning and product development and all of these things. And I think absolutely don't be discouraged. Like, we're just seeing a changing of tides, and it's there's still so much potential. That'll do. That was long, wasn't it? Jesus. All right, back to work.